What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we are here to talk about the one and only Metallica. And I know what a lot of you may be thinking about the title of this video. Like, wait, what are you talking about? How is Metallica easily the most popular metal band of all time? How are they hated? Especially if you were younger and maybe weren't around in the 90s. But it's true. Although these days they are pretty much universally loved and respected, it was not always this way. In fact, they have turned pretty much their entire fan base to turn on them again and again and again with stylistic changes to their music, with their haircuts, with the whole Napster thing, with I Am the Table, and even more. So the question is, what exactly happened? How did Metallica spend nearly 20 years being mostly hated? And how did they turn it around and become the beloved legends that they are today? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. But first, if you haven't, please check me out on Twitch. I'm streaming twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific, and there's a link to that in the description of this video. And also, thanks to Trade Coffee for sponsoring this video. As you may have seen, I've worked with Trade Coffee for quite a while now, and they've sent me quite a few coffees to try. The way they do it is you take their survey where you tell them how you like your coffee, like do you like cream or sugar, what kinds of coffees you like, and so forth, and they match you to the best roasteries in their network based on their experts who taste test every single one of those coffees. For example, they sent me one from Cafe Vita here in Seattle, which is pretty cool. They also have a guarantee. If for whatever reason you don't like what they send you, they will send you a brand new bag for free. And right now, Trade is offering new subscribers a total of $30 off your first order plus free shipping when you go to drinktrade.com/rock. Or click the link in the description of this video. That's more than 40 cups of coffee for free. So if you want to check it out, get started by taking their quiz at drinktrade.com/rock and let Trade find a coffee that you will love. That's drinktrade.com/rock for $30 off. So first of all, I want to set the stage a little bit with some context about exactly where Metallica came from and why that's so important. Metallica started in 1981 as one of the leaders of the emerging thrash metal scene, which at the time was a very underground thing, with bands building their following almost entirely through word of mouth, through the international tape trading scene, and just like touring relentlessly and doing that like underground band kind of grind. And they became very successful as essentially still an underground band. With basically zero mainstream radio support and no music videos, their breakthrough album Master of Puppets went to number 29 in 1986, beating Bruce Springsteen and Stevie Wonder. And they eventually did compromise a little bit and made a music video for the song One in 1989, which got a lot of airplay on MTV's Headbangers Ball and helped them hit number 6 on Billboard with And Justice for All. But that was really about it as far as giving into the demands of the music industry. Which brings me to the first time that Metallica became the most hated band in metal, when they released the Black Album in 1991, which was a huge change for them and for the metal scene in general.
I bought this when it came out. I was horrified when I listened to it. I threw it off a bridge and watched a truck smash it.
For this album, they went to a producer named Bob Rock, pretty great producer name, by the way, who was best known for working with hair metal bands like Bon Jovi and Motley Crue, with the goal of making something a little bit more accessible than the 6 to 9 minute long progressive thrash metal epics on And Justice for All, and it worked. As I'm sure everybody knows, the album went to number 1 on Billboard, and this is when they just absolutely exploded. This is the album that made them into the mainstream icons of metal that they are now, thanks to 5 back-to-back smash hit singles like Enter Sandman, Unforgiven, and Sad But True, which all got massive amounts of airplay on MTV and radio and instantly made them the biggest band in metal. I was 13 when the album came out, and I remember it well. Before the Black Album, really the only people you would see wearing Metallica shirts would be the scary stoner kids. But after the Black Album, suddenly even like the pretty popular girls were wearing Metallica shirts. The change from before and after this album really cannot be overstated, and it wasn't just them, it was the entire scene. They put metal on the map in a mainstream way like nobody has before or since, which was definitely not seen as a good thing by their old school fans who loved albums like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. To them, the Black Album was the ultimate sellout. In their eyes, Metallica had betrayed thrash metal and brought millions of posers into the scene. And in a sense, I can kind of understand where they were coming from, at least back then, because it really did change the scene in a way that I can understand why they weren't happy about it. But what's really surprising to me is that there are people who still think this way, which really shows you that this album was that big of a betrayal in the eyes of those metal traditionalists, like one big knife in the back of the metal scene. And it's really surprising to me to hear people talk that way now, because in hindsight, it seems clear that not only is this a great album, but that it's also probably done more to grow the genre than any other single album. Like, where would metal be today without the Black Album? Some people have never forgiven them for that, but that was far from the last time that Metallica pissed off their fans. The next time was when Metallica released their next album, Load, in 1996, which was very controversial to say the least. And remember, this was their first new album in 5 years after becoming the biggest metal band on the planet, so expectations for this were super, super high. And on a purely musical and sonic level, it was an even bigger departure from their thrash roots than the Black Album, kind of taking things in more of like an alternative grunge kind of direction. They're off to find the hero of the day. And in addition to yet another stylistic shift in their music, they also had a new image. No more long hair and denim vests. Now they had short hair, eyeliner, and facial piercings. That same year, they also headlined the alternative rock festival Lollapalooza, and so they were immediately accused of trying to hop on the grunge bandwagon and trying to sound like Soundgarden or whatever. And so, especially when you consider how much people were already upset with them about the Black Album, they were seen by a lot of metal fans as the ultimate traitors who had turned their back on thrash. And it sounds like, in hindsight, James Hetfield at least agrees with some of that criticism. There's some great songs on there, Hetfield admitted, continuing, but my opinion is that all of the imagery and stuff like that was not necessary, and the amount of songs that were written it diluted the potency of the poison of Metallica, and I think Cliff would have agreed with that. For me personally, I don't think Load is great, and I definitely don't think it needed a sequel in their following album Reload, but at the same time, I do think that the amount of backlash they got was uncalled for. And I find it especially ironic that metal is supposed to be all about rebelling and nonconformity and thinking for yourself, and yet their fans turned on Metallica for something as simple as their haircuts. But that was far from the end. Metallica's next and even more polarizing move was their clash with Napster in 2000.
You know what? Maybe I wouldn't have to whore myself out if you kids didn't steal my music.
And to make a long story short, what happened here is that the band heard their unreleased song I Disappear on the radio, which was supposed to be on the upcoming soundtrack for Mission Impossible 2, and they were shocked because how did this song end up on the radio when the only people who should have a copy of it are us in the band and the producers? Clearly, somehow it had been leaked and shared beyond that inner circle. And after doing some research, they tracked it all down to the file sharing platform Napster. And without really thinking about it too much, the band reacted very aggressively. They immediately sicked their lawyers on Napster, suing the company for millions of dollars, and kind of inadvertently becoming the leaders of the anti-file sharing movement, with Lars even testifying before the Senate.
We traced the source of this leak to a corporation called Napster. In fact, in a 48-hour period where we monitored Napster, over 300,000 users made 1.4 million free downloads of Metallica's music.
And to their surprise, this was a very, very unpopular stance on their part. I think they kind of figured this would be an easy win on their part, because after all, their music was being stolen, right? Like, how could they possibly be in the wrong here? But the public was not on their side, to say the least. It turned out that people really loved Napster and all the access to music that it provided. And so when Metallica kind of came down on Napster, they were seen as these rich, out-of-touch rock stars who were punishing music fans that really just wanted to share this music that they loved.
I started a band named Metallica in 1981 with my best friend James Hetfield. By 1983, we had released our first record, and by 1985, we were no longer living below the poverty line.
And for those who know the band's early history, this was seen as especially hypocritical, because Lars in particular would always talk about how he was like a big part of the tape trading scene in the late 70s, where fans from all over the world would trade copies of metal demos and albums through the mail, and in some ways, Napster was really just like the digital version of that. The band also actively encouraged bootleg recordings of their live shows. They even set up like a special little platform where you could set up to record them. And so for them to come down on Napster was seen as just very out of touch. And in the years since then, they've talked about the whole thing like maybe it was kind of a mistake. And you get the sense that they might have done things differently, or at least been a little bit less aggressive about it.
So all of a sudden, we're like caught in these lights, and we're standing out in the middle going, oops. I guess Napster means a lot to a lot of people.
But in hindsight, I think it's actually pretty clear that they were right. The labels who sued individual fans for downloading stuff, they definitely went too far. You may remember seeing stories about some old lady getting sued because her grandson downloaded a movie on her computer or whatever. But Metallica themselves were absolutely justified to be upset that Napster as a company was profiting off of piracy. I think we can all agree that artists definitely should get paid for their music. And so I think you kind of have to ask, if Metallica didn't put their foot down and take action against Napster, what would have happened? I think it's entirely possible that companies like Bandcamp, Spotify, or even Apple Music might have never even gotten started. Now, Metallica probably could have played it differently, and I definitely don't think Lars was the right guy to be the spokesperson because he's kind of an unlikable person, to be blunt, but I don't think they were wrong. But if you thought that Metallica was done pissing people off, you would be incorrect. The next incident was their infamous 2003 album, Saint Anger, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but just in case you haven't heard it, it sounds like this. And there's no two ways around it. That album is terrible. The songs themselves are just not good. And there's also the matter of that horrible snare drum, which has kind of become a meme all on its own. And for whatever it's worth, it seems like these days they agree that the album was awful and they can kind of have fun with it.
Black album, fame, fortune, right? Saint Anger, despair, misery, anger, loss of revenue. Right? Loss of revenue.
But at the time, a lot of people felt like this was the last straw for Metallica. Because remember, this was their third awful album in a row, and it had been over a decade since the band put out good music. And so a lot of people just kind of wrote them off as yet another example of a band that was good at the beginning, but then ran out of steam, and we just all kind of assumed that they were going to suck forever. And so I would say Metallica's brand was at an all-time low, but somehow they managed to make things even worse. The next incident was the following year, when they released their movie Some Kind of Monster, which documented the process of making Saint Anger. It captured the band at what I have to think was a real low point for them. Their bassist Jason Newsted had just quit the band after like 15 years. There was the Napster backlash, and everyone in the band seemed to basically just hate each other, to the point where they actually had to hire a therapist just to help them get along. If you haven't seen the movie, it's basically 141 minutes of them just bickering about absolutely everything. Like even choosing what time to be at the studio turns into this giant argument.
I gotta tell you, dude, it's pretty difficult to respect a 4 o'clock thing when you show up at 12:25 and you show up at 12:35. It starts right there.
My personal favorite moment from the movie is when they play some of the music for Saint Anger for Lars's dad.
Comments on that one? If you were our advisor, what would you say? Then I would say delete that.
And honestly, the movie makes them just look terrible. At least Lars and James. Kirk comes off pretty well, I think. They come off as just these like petty, spoiled adult children who forgot that they have the incredibly great fortune of playing music for a living and have just completely lost the plot. It's especially tough to see when there's also scenes like Lars getting drunk and spending $5 million on a painting.
The Jean-Michel Basquiat showing on the screen there on my right.
Right, here we go.
Be strong, my friend.
And selling at $5 million. Brett, yours at $5 million.
Right.
Hi. It went well. I got myself drunk to numb the pain, but it went well.
I'm happy.
And especially considering that the album they ended up making as part of this documentary ended up being pretty much like universally hated, this documentary really did hurt the way fans perceived them. Like, you really can't watch this movie and walk away thinking anything other than, what the hell is wrong with Lars and James? But here's the thing, these guys are not stupid. They knew everything that I just said. You know, they saw the dailies for this film. They knew how they came off in it. And yet they allowed the documentary to be released anyway, which I very deeply respect. Think about it this way. How many of us would have had the courage to keep it that real? To be that honest and transparent and let the whole world see us at our worst like that? I think it was actually really cool that they were willing to go there.
I can sit here and stew in my anger and my frustration and my hatred all by myself. Instead of all this fucking psychobabble horse shit.
But with that said, Some Kind of Monster definitely didn't do them any favors. And I'm not going to say that everyone hated Metallica by the mid-2000s, because that would be a little bit of an overstatement. But I do think it's fair to say that of the people who loved them, it was because of their first 4 or 5 albums. Nobody was excited about the state of Metallica in 2005. And so with all of that being said, what happened? How did they turn it around and become who they are now, where they are almost universally loved? Well, for one, I think it was the release of their album Death Magnetic in 2008. I'm not going to say that that was like the best album they ever made, but it was pretty damn good. Kind of like halfway between And Justice for All and the Black Album.
Then you crawl back into your obsession, never to return. This is your confession.
If you haven't heard it, check it out. This album is full of these like 6 to 10 minute thrash epics with tons of tempo changes and double bass and solos. It's everything that old school fans wanted from Metallica. And so Death Magnetic proved that they still had it, at least to some extent. And second, for as much as Lars can be sort of an arrogant, off-putting person at times, the band has always been willing to admit their faults and mistakes. I mean, you saw the clip of him talking shit about Saint Anger. They've admitted that they could have handled the Napster thing better. I'm sure they know that they came off like assholes in Some Kind of Monster. And what more can you ask of anyone than that? We all make mistakes, right? But where most bands are too proud to admit that, they aren't. For any of their faults, they seem like super honest, down-to-earth guys who fuck up just like the rest of us. And so in a way, I almost feel like their mistakes and missteps over the years are kind of why fans actually love them so much. And personally, as a creator, I really respect people who are willing to take chances like they have, even when those choices maybe don't work out so well. I'm obviously not operating anywhere near the level that they are, but even for me, I know how intimidating it is to put out a piece of work where you're not sure if the audience is going to like it or not. But they have had the courage to do that again and again and again on just an absolutely huge global stage, and I respect that so much. And that kind of begs the question of, what if they didn't take those chances? What if they had just caved into the pressure and kept making Master of Puppets over and over and over again just to please those OG thrash fans? What if they had never made the Black Album, which changed metal forever? And so ultimately, while they have made some mistakes over the years, I think you have to respect their willingness to take risks. And to answer the question at the beginning of this video, I think ultimately that is the reason why they still have the respect of just about everyone in metal. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. And I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts a week early. There's a special members-only Discord channel. I do giveaways, and there's a way to have me review your music. Just join at the $10 and up level. And then next time I do a call for submissions, drop your music in the comments of that post. I'll review it live on Twitch, then post it on Patreon for everyone to see. So if that sounds cool to you, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.